Hi again, everybody. Welcome into Unanchored Boston with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch, and as always, we are brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping and Ware, New Hampshire. And the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him, George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. He's a big fan of this show, and we're going to deliver for him today because we have the guest for the ages today, the great Sean McDonough, our friend, our colleague, and a guy that we just continue to marvel at every single night when he goes out and steps behind a microphone. And Bob Lobel, since you're the senior member of this staff, you have the pleasure of formally introducing our good buddy, Sean McDonough.
Yeah, you're catching up to me, believe me. I'm going to just harken right back to Shaughnessy's last column when I'm sure you saw it, Sean. I mean, and a great compliment it was, and it was right on the money, saying basically it's time now that we recognize the greatness of Sean McDonough and the job that he does and his versatility that he has. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There's so many questions. Lynch, let me just, first of all, Sean, congratulations on a great job doing the hockey, but we would have expected nothing else. But this was an extraordinary event that meant nothing. And it was Kornheiser said, yeah, this event that meant nothing, but also became everything in a very short period of time as the Four Nation hockey just dropped in. And there you are, delivering the story, painting the picture, doing what you do best. And it's been a remarkable ride, and it's far from over for you. So how did the Four Nation thing get started? Whose idea was it?
Well, it was an extraordinary event. I think people wondered what it would mean when the idea was hatched a year or so ago. And first of all, I just want to backtrack and say thank you to both of you for your kind words, because, as you know, I grew up idolizing the two of you, wanting to be the two of you, wanting to make what Bob Lobel was making back in the day. Financial goal. And I'm still trying to get there, but it's.
You know what? I don't know. You have foundation, so go ahead.
But I think everybody who's close to the hockey world thought this is a great idea. It's going to be awesome. It'll be 92 of the best players in the world, and anytime these guys play, you guys have been around hockey your whole lives. I mean, you can count on an honest effort in hockey every night. Now, sometimes it's harder than others because of the compressed schedule and how many games these guys play, at such a high speed and at full contact over the course of an NHL season. But, people were asking the players and coaches before this Four Nations face-off, is this going to be like the All-Star? Is this going to be like an exhibition? Are guys really going to go all out because they don't want to get hurt? They have the rest of their season to play. And, everybody involved immediately just scoffed at that. I mean, the idea that these guys are going to be playing for their country in a best-on-best tournament, which really hasn't happened since 2016, that they wouldn't go all out. That was kind of silly. And I think that was put to bed very quickly as soon as those games started to be played. So it was an extraordinary event. And I think the thing that surprised all of us was that how much it captivated, not just hockey fans, but sports fans around the country. I mean, this wound up being the highest rated non-Olympic hockey broadcast ever. More than any game 7 of the Stanley Cup final ever. So
15 million, something like that.
Yeah, Canada and the United States. In the United States, it was 9.3 or 9.4 million, which surpassed game 7 of the Bruins Stanley Cup final in 2019, by the way, against the St. Louis Blues. So, it caught on. I had friends of mine all over the country sending me notes. I was at this bar and the place was packed and there wasn't any TV on an NBA game. It was all on your game. I had friends of mine saying we just had a watch party here in Atlanta and people are so caught up in this. So it really did take on a life of its own. And as we all know, it's a wonderful thing, and it doesn't always happen in sports when it lives up to the hype, right? Thursday, I could tell this is going to have a huge audience just in the anticipation of the messages I was getting. I had more messages during and after, text messages and emails and phone than any game I've ever done in my life. And that's any game. So It was an awesome success story. The event itself was great. It meant a lot more to me personally that it was in Boston. I mean, the morning of the game, I'm sitting in the Will McDonough press room talking to Mike Sullivan and John Cooper, thinking my dad would think this is pretty cool right now that his kid's going to be in this building where we had his wake and do an event.
You know what, Sean? That is exactly the point I was going to ask you. Did you have, and I was, as I'm watching, I'm saying, Sean, it's not the same building. It was in the old building where your dad had his wake. And did you actually consciously think of the fact that you're going to be doing this game Thursday night at the Boston Garden for this huge audience in the same building that your father had his wake in? I mean, did that go through your mind?
Very much so. You know, I've lived my whole life, Bob and Lynchy, more than anything else, you know, wanting to make my dad proud. You know, live a life that hopefully is pleasing to God and be kind to others and make my dad proud. And that I'm 62 and that's still my goal. So a lot of those messages I got after the game had some variation of your dad would be really proud or your dad's smiling at you. And I'm going to get emotional now saying it, but it was meaningful to me. And what kind of prompted, it was just walking in the Will McDonough press room. But then, and remembering the day Harry Sinden and Nate Greenberg and Rich Creswick called me the day after my dad died to tell me they wanted to name that room in the building after him, which was something I'll never forget. But I asked Mike Sullivan, you know, he's from Marshfield, the coach of Team USA, great player at BU, and obviously one of the great NHL coaches of his era, the only American who's won 2 Stanley Cups as a head coach. I asked him, you know, this would be, in our little meeting with him, this would be awesome anywhere, right? I mean, the event that this has become, but does it mean more to you that it's in your hometown here in Boston? And Sully's a pretty stoic guy, and he got very choked up. And he said, absolutely it does. And I thought, you know what, he and I are feeling kind of the same thing here. So, that part of it made it that it was in Boston. You know, I want to make, every time I go on national TV, I always find a way to mention the great city of Boston. Remember, that was the opening line of the telecast, from the great city of Boston, blah, blah, blah. Anytime there's somebody from Massachusetts in there, I get teased all the time by our crew. Wow, you never mentioned miss a chance Norwood, Mass, or Millis, Mass, or North Chelmsford.
Don't think that doesn't go unnoticed, Sean, because as I'm watching the telecast on Thursday night, you're bringing up Boston University. You talk about even Harvard, for crying out loud, and Boston College, and you go right down. It doesn't matter. And then you bring in Minnesota, because we're talking not a broadcast, Boston broadcast, where, you know, obviously it's a national broadcast and, you know, continental, worldwide broadcast. But the names that you're able to bring in and for people to identify, I thought it was fantastic. And it's just all part of your style, because by mentioning their names, you include them in the telecast, and it makes them feel good.
Thought about this too, especially in that game the other night. A lot of people watching don't watch hockey, right? And that proved up to be true. I mean, we had twice as many people as we had, more than twice as many for the game against Canada the previous Saturday in Montreal, which got an enormous rating. So, you know, it wasn't lost on me. A lot of these people watching don't know who these players are, or if they do, they don't know much about them, or they might know something about some of them, not all of them. So I think as much as you can weave in, he's the oldest player. He's the youngest player. He's from Minnesota. He plays for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's the 3-time league MVP. He's the only player to score 69 goals in the last 30, whatever it is. But it's hard in hockey because the game goes very fast, way faster than when the three of us used to sit up next to Nate in the old rafters. You know, and you could have a hot dog and the puck was still going up the ice. And no offense to guys from, you know, those are my idols too growing up. You know, I love those Bruins teams. I love going to those games. But even they'll admit the game is way faster than it was. Players are bigger, faster, stronger, more skilled. None of the guys from our heyday argue that. Haven't had one conversation with any player from 25, 30 years ago who would say, no, it was actually faster when we played. And part of that's the rule changes, right? I mean, they took out the 2-line pass, which I think was a great rule. So anyway, but it's hard because the game goes really fast. And when we first got back into the NHL 4 years ago, and we got it back from NBC, I got stuck in mid-sentence many times telling a story, and, you know, And I talked to Mike Lynch this morning, and he said, "Goal!" And you're like, "Oh, jeez." Worse. So I had to learn, everything. You can tell stories or throw in tidbits, but they better be quick little bullet points unless there's a stoppage in play. So that's what I was trying to do within the game, just to humanize the players a little bit and help inform some of the fans who might not be with us as often as others.
Sean, you called it the toughest ticket.
Sorry
Toughest, that's no problem. We've done worse on this show, trust me.
I bet.
You call it the toughest ticket in the history of the building. And that's a pretty big statement, because that building.
I hope I said one of them. That's what I meant. But,
no,
I think that's what I said. And if I didn't, I should have.
No, but you're right.
And I have personal experience. In 2019, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final against the Blues, I wanted to go to the game as a fan. Matter of fact, it was that night I was sitting with my great pal Andrew Newman, Boston Golf Club player extraordinaire. He kicked the crap out of any one of the three of us on the links, and has in my case. But Andrew and I and a couple other friends just went online. I don't want to bother anybody, to get tickets. Such a bad look on the day of a big game. Let's just go on one of these websites. So we bought great tickets, 15th row, center ice. So I went for curiosity's sake. The day of last Thursday, the day of the game of the championship game of the Four Nations, and went on the website to look at what tickets in that range where I sat were going for the other night. And they were more than 3 times more than what I paid 5-6 years ago for a Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final involving the home team. So that was sort of my thought. And I'm sure Celtics NBA Finals and things have been a ridiculously tough ticket too, but it was certainly among the tough. And I have never had more people reach out to me leading up to a game to ask me, can I help them get tickets? Sadly, the answer is no.
Just everything leading up to the game, Gretzky comes out as the honorary captain. All right, how do we top this? Well, here comes the Ruzioni. That's how we top this. And the only thing I was disappointed in the NHL is they didn't let Todd Angeli sing both anthems.
Yeah, felt bad. I think that's a good point. I think they wanted to make it. I don't know. The NHL does a fantastic job with big events. I think of the Winter Classic and the Stadium Series, which we have coming up this weekend at Ohio State in the Horseshoe. But yeah, I felt bad for Todd. Now it was great to have the pops. I thought one of the highlights of the whole thing was the woman. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Chantal, who sang the Canadian national anthem. She intentionally changed the words to, I think, that only us command, which was clearly a nod to President Trump. We're going to command our own country, and we're not going to be the 51st state. When she did it, I looked at the stage manager in our booth, Ivan Sokolsky, kind of mouthed him like, she just kind of mangled the words, right? Thinking we didn't find out till the next day that she did it on purpose. So, there was obviously a lot of intrigue into the whole national anthem thing. Can never argue with the Boston Pops, but Todd Angeli's awesome. He's as great an anthem singer as we have in the NHL, and I'm sure it was a disappointment for him. But he did have the opportunity in the games on Monday and the game before they played Sweden, and did as usual a fantastic job.
I think the Boston fans at the Garden did a remarkable job of restraint in the booing aspect when they had a chance to. Canada set the bar pretty low in their booing.
Bob, they might have, but I understand it, right? And I
totally get it. I totally understand exactly what you're saying. Yes, I agree with you.
I was on WEI a couple of days before the championship game, maybe the day before, and they asked me, do you think the fans are going to boo? The Boston fans are going to boo? And I said, I hope not, because, just because some of their people booed our anthem and it's disrespectful, certainly, doesn't mean we have to respond in kind. And they have reason to be agitated, right? I mean,
yes,
they do, particularly the stuff with the 51st state. I'm not an economist. I don't understand all the stuff about tariffs. whether they're a good idea, bad idea, fair, unfair, if we've been on the wrong side of whatever with Canada, Mexico, China, whoever else. I don't understand any of that. So, but I do understand their anger, quite frankly, having been up there in Montreal for almost a week and talked to people about this stuff about Canada's going to become the 51st state, right? You'd boo whoever said that too. So it wasn't directed at Team USA. It wasn't directed at the U.S. national anthem. It wasn't directed at anything other than our president. That's the reality. So I get it, but I was very proud, to your point, Bob, about, that there was a smattering of boos at the very beginning when Chantal started singing. It ended very quickly, and it was actually kind of drowned out by people who were clearly singing along with the Canadian.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. I was pleasantly surprised, to tell you the truth.
Me too, right? Because our town has a reputation for being
absolutely right.
Hey, Canada, you want to boo our national anthem? How about this? I was very pleasantly surprised. And I just love how today's media world works. I go on WEI. I was asked a question, and I said, I hope they don't boo. Now on websites all over America, Sean McDonough calls on Americans not to boo. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I just said, I hope they don't boo. And I understand why the Canadians booed. But anyway, and to the other point, Bob, that you made, which I want to amplify, it was Gretzky was uncomfortable coming out there for a lot of reasons, which I heard through the grapevine, one of which was some other time he was introduced in Boston as the greatest hockey player of all time, and it got roundly booed because, as we know, number 4 is the greatest hockey player of all time. So I think he was a little bit afraid of that. But how can you boo Wayne Gretzky or any one of the great players? I think Bobby Orr's is the greatest player ever, but Wayne Gretzky is in the conversation. They might be 1 and 1A, but he's also a classy, he's just, you can't boo Wayne Gretzky. And then to have Eruzione out there and a tip of the hat to Michael, to wear Johnny Gaudreau's number 13.
Yes.
I'm going to get choked up again thinking about it. That was perfect.
Absolutely. Were you surprised how many red jerseys there were in the crowd, Sean?
No, because I think a lot of those people, the Canadians, bought those tickets way in advance. Yeah. We had actually heard that ticket sales were good, brisk, and we'll probably have a sellout. This was before the event started in Boston, but, they weren't cheap. And obviously it went from, are they going to sell out the building? They probably are, to, oh my goodness, nobody can get a ticket. So I wasn't surprised because I think a lot of those people did it in advance. And then I just think, given the magnitude of what the game was, those people wanted to come down and be a part of it. And as we know from, lots of Canada, it's a very easy trip to get down to our great city. Yeah.
Is this a one and done event, do you think?
No. I really don't. I don't think they should do it every year because then you do kind of diminish what makes it special. It won't happen next year, obviously, because we have the Olympics and there will be a traditional All-Star game, which, I wouldn't mind if all All-Star games went away at this point. Yeah. Having done 3 out of the 4 of them, I've done the Pro Bowl, the Major League Baseball All-Star game, and the NHL All-Star game. Never done the NBA thing, which I didn't even watch, and I'm glad I didn't because the narrative I kept hearing was, especially compared to the 4 nations face-off, the NBA thing was particularly bad. So I think they're going to rethink that. But and then they're bringing back the World Cup of Hockey in 2028, which will be great because, it'll give David Pastrnak and the Czechs a chance to play, and some other nations. Hopefully, if the world situation is different and Russia's not at war with Ukraine or somebody else, they'll be involved again on the international stage. So I think that will be awesome too. But I think we'll see this again in some form, but I don't think it's going to be every year.
Sean, what would your dad think of your career?
I hope he'd be proud. I think there are things that he would be proud of for sure. I think he knows, watching from above, I work hard at it. I prepare as hard as I possibly can for every assignment. I try to be honest, about whatever's happening in the game. The caliber of the play, the coaching, the officiating, the atmosphere. Like him, not afraid to offer an opinion, but like him, I try to make sure that it's fair and supported in facts, and that it's not, you're not trying to harangue somebody. And I think he would be proud that I try to never make it about me or insert myself into it. People tune in to watch the game. We can enhance people's enjoyment of the game. That's always been my goal, to enhance people's enjoyment of the game and not detract from it. And sometimes there's a fine line. So, hopefully tell them something they don't know, maybe occasionally offer an interesting story, the stats at the right time, interact with your teammates on the broadcast well, but remember that people are there to watch the game and not you or not me. So I hope he'd be proud, and I think the most important thing I hope is that he understands that I try to treat everybody I come in contact as I would hope to be treated. That's the way we're supposed to live life. And, the reason why we had his wake and funeral at the TD Garden, it wasn't because he was a well-known sports writer, as you guys know, but it's because, he impacted so many people's lives. I'm going to write a book about this someday if I ever get around to it. Just random people that he met, random acts of kindness and things that he did for charities and that no one ever knew about except the people involved. That's why so many people were there, because he impacted so many people's lives in a positive way, some in a negative way. He certainly was not without his enemies, is probably too strong a word, but it's been used before. So, there was no gray area with Dad, as you guys know. But his heart was in the right place. And anyway, I'm sorry for such a long-winded answer.
No, there can never be enough Will McDonough talk for Bob and I, as you know. And I've texted you a number of times, I think, the anniversary of your dad's death, how proud he would be of you. And I know the other night he was, I don't know if he was on a pair of skates, but he was doing victory laps either around the garden or around the ice after your performance the other night. You can be sure of that.
Well, that means the world to me, as you know, Lynchy, and your messages and the kind ones I've received from Bob over the years too, always mean a lot. The fact that it was in Boston, I'm 62. I've done just about everything I could ever dreamed about doing. And then this kind of fell into our laps, right? We talked about that's going to be a nice event. It's great that it's in Montreal and Boston. But the magnitude that it took on, and to have it be there and to be sitting in that booth and in the press room and looking out at so many people I know in the stands, and having such a connection to Boston, as we talked about earlier, with the players and the coaches. And, I literally said, thank you, Lord, because this is an awesome thing to happen, especially unexpectedly at this time in my life. And people keep asking me, like, how much longer you want to do this? And, it's 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, a little over a month ago, actually, I got a chance to do the first college football playoff game at the highest level ever played on a campus.
Yeah.
It was at Notre Dame.
Yep.
At night, incredible atmosphere. That never gets old. And for me, being raised by an aunt who was a sister of Notre Dame, who loved Notre Dame and loved the Virgin Mary and loved everything that went with Notre Dame, I wanted to go to Notre Dame. They had the good sense to not admit me to their university, which is part of it. I wound up at Syracuse instead, which was the great place for me, certainly in terms of a wannabe broadcaster and also in life, because I worked for Dick McPherson there for 3.5 years, who became like my second dad. We all remember Coach Mack, or those of us old enough to, when he coached the Patriots.
Sure.
So anyway, God is good. And that's really the way I felt about that whole event. And I still feel about it. Just such a blessing, the way that whole thing came together and everything that went into it.
Ironically, he went to Syracuse, as did Bob Newmeyer. And
he would have loved that event.
Yeah, he would have. Yep.
Oh, my God. As I think about that out there. And Lynch, there are only two guys that I ever cried on television about. And one was your dad, and the other was Newmeyer. And we had this video, right, Lynch? We just saw this little video from the first Super Bowl that the Patriots won in New Orleans.
Right.
After 9/11, it was a pretty dramatic moment. You want to throw that up, Mike?
Sure. Well, here it is.
Yeah, watch
I
it.
told you before the game, if they could get to halftime and they could get the lead, I thought they were going to win the game. And like we said before the game, I thought the two most important players for New England would be Ty Law, scores a touchdown, Otis, who played a great game. But my most valuable player, and I'm going to write about it tomorrow morning in the Globe, is Romeo Cornell, the defensive coordinator. This is a defensive team in the history of the game. They shut him down, and he had to go head-to-head not only with Kurt Warner, but with Mike Martz. No timeouts, and get it done.
Okay, come on over here, Willie. We're looking at pictures of celebration. We're looking at pictures alive from celebration back in Boston. We can only imagine. We saw the celebration here.
Man.
We can only imagine what's going on back there.
They're probably tearing it up, tearing the city up, and they deserve it. You know, it's a long time coming. Nobody believed in us but our fans and the guys on the field and our families.
Wow. It must give you chills, huh, Sean?
Oh, wow. Yeah. And my dad didn't live too much longer after that. You know, I'm glad he lived longer to see the Patriots do that. I had friends of mine who were in the press. As we know, I mean, he was at war, to use too strong a word, with the Patriots for much of their history. The Sullivan family, who we had kind of a on and off thing with, and the Krafts too, but Robert Kraft in particular. But the friends of mine who were in the press box said when the field goal went through the uprights, my dad stood up and clapped. You know, he was the furthest thing from a cheerleader. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, he was around it since 1960. He saw every second of their bizarro history up until that point.
Yep.
So, you know, I'm just so glad he was there. You know, he never saw the Red Sox win the World Series. So he got to see that. And yeah, as usual, his analysis was spot on as well. But yeah, very special memory. Thanks for sharing that, guys.
You know, there was a Cold War going on for a long time between the print media and the electronic media. And Willie McDonough came over to the dark side with the electronic media and did both, as he said in that interview. And I'm going to write for the Globe tomorrow morning while he's talking on electronic media to Bob Lobel after the Super Bowl. And I think he made it easier for the print media to cross that line, to come over and work in the electronic media. And now it tells something about those days when, you know, there was a chill in the air. And it's silly now, but that's another thing that Will McDonough should get credit for, bridging the two types of media.
Right. Well, and you're right. And I think most people really consider him the pioneer of the information man, you know, the newspaper who made the transition into TV. And it really happened by accident. You know, on the old NFL Today, Brent Musburger actually told me this story one time. They brought my dad down for a Sunday on the NFL Today as a guest to talk about something he had written, where, as usually, he had a scoop. I don't know if it was about the labor situation, about something. So he went down, and Brent said, and so while he's just sitting around waiting, and before and after, and while they're watching the game, he kept telling them, you know, so-and-so isn't going to play in that game today. They're saying that he's going to start a quarterback, but he's not. And you know, if they lose that game, that coach is probably going to get fired this week, and blah, 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 blah. And Brent said, everything your dad said turned out to be true. So he's the one who said, hey, why don't we bring this guy back next week? You know, and so it happened totally by accident. And over the years, you know, John Clayton and Chris Mortensen and Peter King. Peter King came up to me at my dad's funeral as we were walking out of St. Augustine's in South Boston, and grabbed me by the arm. And he said, when I got on TV, the first person I called was your dad to say thank you. Because, you know, if he didn't lead the way and if he wasn't, you know, if they tried it and it didn't work, they would have said, oh, that's a bad concept. We're not going to do that. Adam Schefter, the same things. You know, your dad's the person I try to emulate. So he really was the pioneer. He only stuck with it for one reason, as you guys know. He didn't care about being on TV. The reason he probably went on at 11:30 at night with you guys for all those years was you paid him $50 or $100. You know, he would in here if it wasn't. I was the oldest of five, just about to go to Syracuse University, and you know, and there were several others heading to college after me. So he, by his own admission, he did it because of the money. And thank God it came, right? Because it was perfect time. I literally was heading off to college, and even at the beginning of my college, we were strategizing how I was going to make it through, with as expensive it was even back then.
Yeah, it was something else. Let me ask you. Let's go back to just broadcasting a hockey game. You work other sports, and you're shoulder to shoulder with your analyst. In hockey, you got Ray Ferraro between the glass, between both benches, and you're upstairs. And it can be so easy to step on each other because you don't see each other when they're trying to make a point. But you guys are seamless. I mean, that you never step on each other. How do you avoid that?
Well, it's a great question. It's interesting because this is our 4th season now back in the NHL that we've worked together. The first couple of games, we were actually side by side in the booth. And you guys have been upstairs to the 9th floor.
Yeah.
The booth is basically wide enough for 2 of you and a stage manager / stats person. And it's super high. I mean, we're on the 9th floor of the TD Garden. I always tell buddies of mine to go to Bruins games, buy the worst seat in the place, and then in the last row of the balcony, and then look back and up and further back. That's where I am, trying to call the game on national TV with this big of a puck. It's 6 stories above the ice. The ice level is on 3, and the booth is on 6. So it's like hanging out of a 6-story window trying to describe what's happening finding the puck on the street. And so, there are times when, I don't know if the puck hit the post, hit somebody out in front, if the goalie saved it. Mike Emmerich, the great Mike Emmerich, Doc Emmerich, had an expression, and it did not go. And when it was around the net and there was a flurry, and it did not go, which I came to learn was Doc's clever way of saying it didn't go in the net. I don't know why, but it didn't go in the net. So I've tried to come up with little ways to say that without stealing one of his catchphrases. But the point about Ray, it takes discipline on his part because, the puck's going up and down fast. So there are little ways, Lynchy. I mean, when the defenseman's standing behind his own net with the puck and both teams are changing and there's clearly going to be a couple of seconds where nothing's happening, I lay out, basically count to 3 in my own head and figure, okay, if Ray wants to jump in, here's a chance. Sometimes if the play is going on for long stretches at times and it's in the neutral zone, but we both know, Ray knows if he jumps in, it has to be quick. You can't do a soliloquy. And I know if I'm going to tell a story, it has to be quick because especially 4 years ago, I got stuck in mid-sentence so many times when there was a penalty, a goal, whatever else, and it's really bad TV. So there's a little rhythm to it, but I really like it. Because I have 27 pages of notes that I like to be able to spread out and take things on the wall. And you don't have to worry about being like this with Ray. I mean, I barely had enough room the other night, really didn't, in that booth just by myself. And with Ivan, our stage manager, stats guy. And then Ray sees things. We're 6 stories above the ice. So Ray sees things. For example, you guys will remember this. The Saturday night game, USA-Canada in Montreal, Matthew Tkachuk has the fight right off the drop of the puck. And then Ray says, and as soon as they drop the puck, Brady, Tkachuk, and Sam Bennett are going to go. And the reason he knew that, because he was between the benches, Brady yelled at Sam Bennett across to the Canadian bench, hey, Benny, as soon as they're done, we're going. So we don't get that if he's upstairs next to me.
Right.
So, and he sees things. He can say, that puck got tipped, or that was a great skate save, or whatever, or he can talk to the refs and they can explain something to him during a timeout. So there's a real benefit to having him down there. And I like it a lot.
That was the fascinating thing about the Four Nation thing. To me, was all the sociological implications between the players that were friends, between the players that played golf together, went out drinking together, and ended up fighting together against each other. The first game, 8 seconds were in. The second game at the Boston Garden, or the second night, Thursday night, the final night at the Garden, was 8 seconds in. And by that time in the first game, there had been 4 guys in the penalty box.
and it's so true. And like in the case of the fights Saturday night, Brady fought Matthew's teammate, Sam Bennett. Matthew.
That's exactly right. And those guys must have played golf 100 times together.
Oh, I'm sure they did. And I tried it. This was a longer story that fortunately I got through without something disastrous happening, like somebody scoring a goal. And we all remember this. the playoffs last year, Sam Bennett lays out Marchand right in front of the Bruins bench. Bostonians thought it was a dirty hit, and he should have been suspended or at least disciplined more. He wasn't really disciplined at all. Knocks Marshy out for 2 games. Then Bennett scores that goal which should have been goalie interference. I can have my black and gold pom-poms on that, because everybody I talked to around the NHL, especially except the replay people that night, thought that should have been no goal, but it counts. So Bennett is the enemy in Boston, and he and Marchand hate each other, and they're playing on the same line.
I know. It's like,
So those are the stories that you try to tell, because, hopefully, to our point earlier about enhancing people's enjoyment, there's a lot of people who don't know that story unless you live in Florida, Boston. You probably
I don't know. How about if you're Don Sweeney? How about if you're the general manager and pick somebody from your own team, or don't pick somebody from your own team to play on
Right.
I'm just saying all the possibilities.
Everybody in Canada was like, Don Sweeney, what are you doing? Jordan Binnington, he might be the 6th best Canadian goalie. He's having a bad year for the St. Louis Blues. Logan Thompson from the Washington Capitals is 24-2-3 or whatever he was at the break. He's probably going to finish second in the Vezina to the American goalie, Connor Hellebuck. Why is Binnington even on the team? Well, Donnie remembered sitting up there and at Game 7 of 2019 Stanley Cup Final, watching Binnington. Binnington did that night. We all know because we watched it, and I said I was there. Binnington did the whole game against the Bruins when he made 32 saves, gave up 1 goal. What he did in the overtime to Team USA the other night. These not only are they unbelievable saves, but it's Austin Matthews who's the greatest goal scorer in the world right now. He scored more goals last year than anybody scored in 30 years. And and he had 2 or 3 unbelievable chances. We've all been around sports long enough. That's when I knew in my mind, when he made those stops and the USA was all over and didn't score, I said, this is not going to end well. This is a bad omen for Team USA. And then Team USA, the best thing they did the whole tournament was defend as a team, right? There were very few great glittering chances for their opponents. And then in the overtime, Connor McDavid is all by himself, side of the leg. They didn't do that once the whole tournament, but there was an awful lot that went into it. That's for sure.
Are people going to remember this event 5-10 years from now? Are they going to say, remember that series? I forget who was playing. Are they going to remember it as USA Canada? Are they going to remember it as the 4 nations face off?
I hope so. I think because I just think, and I think I was on a podcast yesterday with Richard Deitch, who writes the sports TV column for The Athletic. And he said, this event and your guys' coverage of it, who is benefiting greatly from this? NBC. Because the Olympic hockey in the next Olympics, people are going to be glued to it even more than in the past. So I think so. I just, especially in Canada, Connor McDavid now, as I said one time during the telecast, who's going to be Sidney Crosby? Maybe it's even going to be Sidney Crosby. He scores another huge international goal. Who's going to be Paul Henderson? You guys remember that back in the early
72
when the great Harry Sinden coached Team Canada. My dad wrote a book with Harry called Hockey Showdown, which was all about the inner workings of that tournament, which was fascinating because, it was the Russians back then. And, who's going to be Mike Eruzione? I don't think the goal would have been there with Michael's, but if you're listing huge international goals for Team USA in any of these Olympics or World Cups or Canada Cups, if the USA won that goal, you're going to say Michael, and then who are you going to say?
Yeah.
So I think it'll be, it was the quality of the play. That's the greatest hockey I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because you had
a lot of people have said that same thing. It's the best hockey they've ever seen.
Mike Sullivan made the point. We had a game 2 days later in Pittsburgh, our ABC Hockey Saturday. So we were meeting with Sully again before they played the Washington Capitals. And he talked about the game was incredibly fast, but open ice was hard to come by. It wasn't like guys are just flying down the wing and it's Guy Lafleur. It was incredibly fast, but there was very little open ice because they all defended, with such tenacity. Everybody, I think people remember it because it was really the best hockey I've ever seen. Game 7, we did Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final last June in Florida. It was awesome, tremendous anticipation, but you don't have 18 skaters on each team as good as those 18 skaters were on those two teams the other night. I mean, Dylan Larkin's first line star of the Detroit Red Wings, he was a great player on Team USA. He was a fourth line guy most of this tournament. The Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers didn't have Dylan Larkin playing on their fourth line, or Vincent Trocheck in the Stanley Cup Final. So it was remarkably great hockey.
Well, Sean, I have to do a commercial here, but I'm going to incorporate
Please do.
some of your experiences in this. This is about Cold Springs RV, the campers, and I just want to point out to our viewers and listeners, if you're ready to see what's new in 2025 when it comes to camping, Cold Springs RV has next year's models, and they're arriving daily, and it's in Ware, New Hampshire. And don't ask me where Ware is, but Ware's in New Hampshire, and it's west of Goffstown, which is named after the Detroit quarterback, and then north of Tingsboro, which of course is named after Tingsboro. But if you were going to do, correct me if I'm wrong, you did the luge in Sarajevo. Was it Sarajevo, or where was it?
Bobsled and luge in Albertville, France in 92, okay, and in Lillehammer, Norway in 94. I am still frostbitten from Lillehammer.
Well, it would have been a great place to get
the whole 5 Fahrenheit the whole time we were there, and it was probably 30 below at night, and we had to take our on cameras outside, and it had to be at 8 in the morning because the ice had to be similarly hard for everybody to make it fair, because not that it was going to get slushy when it's 5 degrees out, but yeah, I did the bobsled and luge twice.
Well, what a great place to go camping, even if it is 5 degrees.
100%. I've thought many times, let's go back to Lillehammer.
Right. Who wouldn't want to go?
RVs. I'm going to drive up to Ware. As you might imagine, my dad was many things. A camper was not one of them. We're going up to Mount Washington, and no.
Well, that's just one. And I don't know if you were going to go to Augusta this year. Are you going to be do the Masters this year?
No, waiting to find out. My annual role there, a tradition unlike any others, we like to say at Augusta, is to host the par 3 competition on Wednesday. But it comes kind of right in the middle of the hockey stretch run there. So I'm probably a game time decision. It's always a blessing to do it, but I don't know if I'll be there this year or not.
Well, if you had a camper, this would be an easy go. You could go.
Camper, you can't get a hotel room down there.
No, you have, go to the city park and go camp out there and find a spot.
You know what? John Daly does that. John Daly has an RV, probably not as nice as the ones you could get if you went to Ware, which everybody should, obviously.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, and he parks it in the parking lot at the Hooters in Augusta.
Oh, do they still have them?
They'll have appearances there and the whole thing. And so there are plenty of RVs down there in Augusta, Georgia.
Which is where I am right now. I'm in Hilton Head right now. It's just 2 hours down the road. So
good for you.
Here we go. Hooters.
Arizona. I'm afraid Lynch is going to lose on the temperature.
I'm in Naples.
Oh.
How pathetic is that? You're in Arizona. He's in Naples.
And right out the window, I don't know if it's the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico. Which one is?
I'm going to let you go into that because, your taxes can be audited tomorrow morning. It's funny. We've spent 46 minutes talking about how awesome Boston is, and none of us are actually sitting right there in the middle of it. Yes.
It's like
this is the longest Cold Springs RV. It's the longest commercial in the history of commercials. You've been talking for 6 minutes now, Logan.
Right, the doors are always open. You can freely browse, but you already know everything you need to know. It's the place to go, because if you go there, you could be any one of the 3 places where we are, either in Naples or in Arizona or in Hilton Head right now. As a matter at the Hilton Head National Golf Course, right down the street. It's an RV golf course. You can park your RV there and stay there and play. I can't make this up.
I
I love you all. Thank you very much. CoolSpringsRV.com. Thank you. Thanks for playing along.
Well, I know one thing, and Lynch, you just alluded to it. There could never be a sponsor more satisfied with his or her sponsorship than Cold Spring. That was probably supposed to be a 30-second read that turned out.
It was kind of like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you know why Lobel and Lynch never read any spots on live TV on Channel 4 and Channel 5.
Well, plus, you guys, I mean, the reason you guys were stars is, you had 5 minutes. Now, what are they on for 45 seconds? It's really kind of.
It's not a lot.
No.
And we're not done with Cold Springs RV because now, Sean, the question of the day comes to you.
Is that appearance fee?
So Cold Springs RV is in the production stages of making like a Madden cruiser, a Lobel Lynchy cruiser. And we're going to let you have it for a week, and you get to ride across country. You can take it from Arizona back to the East Coast or vice versa, whichever way.
Wow.
But you have to pick one person. Last time I know you picked your dad. You have to pick one person that to ride shotgun with you, to be someone that you would like to have a conversation with for an entire week. It can be live, it can be deceased, it can be sports, non-sports. We had Andy Brickley last week. He selected Humphrey Bogart.
Really?
Yeah. So whoever you'd like to ride shotgun for a week, who would it be?
The easy answer for me would be Jesus. I would be riding shotgun alongside Jesus. It wouldn't be that.
Good one. That was good.
Yeah. The most important person who ever walked the earth. So to me,
that's good. And nobody's picked Jesus before. I think he's available.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is he's along for the ride with us all day, every day.
That's good.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Let me see. We'll pick from spheres of like history in the political history. I would probably say George Washington, right? What would that like, right? With everything that went into what he did to get us going.
Wasn't he just voted the second most popular president?
I'm not. Don't keep trying to drag me back into this.
I'm just saying. I just heard that on television that George Washington was, whoever was first. Huh?
Who was number one?
Well, whoever made the announcement that he was number one, George Washington happened to finish second.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. It was on TV, so it must have happened.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like sports and entertainment. Who would I want to? If you're going to pick somebody from that realm, Humphrey Bogart would be a pretty good pick. I don't know. I'm not going to.
George Washington is a great pick.
Yeah, George Washington. Yeah, imagine saying that must have been at that point in history and everything that
unbelievable
he had to deal with. Fight off the British, establish a new country.
He's a busy guy.
I'd go with George Washington.
He may not be as busy as you were doing all these hockey games, but he's a busy guy.
But it was great. Like I remember, the things. People think we just show up and do these games. Right? I did a game at Army several years ago. I don't know if you've ever been to the United States Military Academy there in West Point. I'm guessing.
Yes, I have many times. Played baseball there.
Beautiful, right? Spectacularly beautiful place. In addition to, especially there in the fall, sitting on the bluffs overlooking the Hudson. And they gave us a tour, and we went up to this high hill, and the tour guide said, and that is where George Washington had them extend the chains across the entire width of the Hudson River to stop the ships from coming up the Hudson. I'm thinking, wow, pretty primitive idea, but I guess it worked, right? Let's just extend a chain across the river and stop them. So, George Washington would be my vote.
I think Washington's a great pick, and you had to be a hockey fan because he went across the Delaware when it was frozen, right?
100%. Probably a good skater.
Yeah,
I'm guessing probably a feisty left wing.
Yeah, I think.
I was going to ask you about your dad and Parcells. All had the same agent, didn't Will and Parcells had this, and Payne Stewart
Yeah.
They all died.
Mike Lester, yeah, he made far fewer commissions from me than he did off those guys. Yeah, the late, great Robert Fraley, who died in the plane crash with Payne Stewart. Still one of the saddest days of my life. And it strikes me every year in late October when the anniversary comes around again. Yeah, he was a wonderful guy, 45 years old. Dear friend of my dad and Parcells, a lot of other people. Just incredibly sad. Just
It was awful.
lovely guy. The agents. You think of people whose reputations maybe aren't spotless. They're kind of they're a little deceptive or whatever. He was just the most honorable, honest, decent, good human being, and I miss him all the time. Our charity golf tournament back in the day up at the International, we used to give out the Robert Fraley Memorial Goodness Award to somebody who kind of embodied all of those same characteristics of service to others.
Interesting. Oh.
I can still remember your dad, and it might have been the NFC Championship game. But Parcells has got a styrofoam cup of coffee, and your dad and he are walking on the field at Giants Stadium. And it had to be 7:30 in the morning. And it's probably a 12:30 kickoff. And I said, this is access. This is how you get somebody. Will McDonough is doing something that no member of the media can do right now, the day of the game, with Bill Parcells.
Yeah, and he had a lifetime of that, with Bill and with a lot. The late, great Joe O'Donnell told me the story, a dear friend to all of us, that my dad was at the league meetings, I think it was in Palm Springs, on the day that Pete Rozelle announced he was stepping down, retiring as the commissioner. And Joe O'Donnell's like, and he had to put together a press conference, and my dad wasn't there. I think he had taken my little brother Ryan to a baseball game, or maybe even Joe Platt. I can't remember why he wasn't there. But my dad said, no big deal. So my dad got back to the hotel, called Pete Rozelle's room. Pete said, sure, come on up. Let's chat. So he was having more access than anybody else did. So, yeah, that was, I think, part of his success, right? He just had relationships with people. Sometimes he got criticized for them being too friendly or cozy, but he didn't care. I mean, that's the last thing he really cared about. So, it was his job to inform the viewers, and part of that was the extraordinary access that he had. Matter of fact, the last time I saw Robert Fraley was about a month before he died. My dad and I was in New York, I think, to a Red Sox game. It was in September. It was when Bill was coaching the Jets, and Vinny Testaverde was their quarterback. And the Jets were based in Garden City, Long Island at the time, their practice facility. And we were playing golf at that great Garden City Golf Club the next day. So Robert and my dad had gone to see Bill at their facility. I didn't go with them. But I asked him when we were playing, how was Bill? He said, typical Bill. Gloom and doom. Everybody thinks they're going to have a great year. The Jets are going to take a big step. He's like, something bad's going to happen. I know it, blah, blah, blah. And if I remember correctly, Vinny Testaverde, while we were playing golf, blew out his Achilles in the opener for the Jets. So even though Bill could skew toward negative thinking in that instance, he might have had a little bit of a premonition. So, yeah, there were a lot of things like that. My dad would tell stories about interactions that he had that never wound up getting on TV or in a newspaper or whatever. He had a fascinating life. It was too short that he died at 67. But as my dad would say, he didn't get cheated.
I was unfortunately I was at Joe O'Donnell's house when he got the phone call from your stepmom, and Joe liked these shoes I wore that were waterproof or something, so I bought a pair for him at New Balance, and I get done in the news about 11:30, 11:45, and O'Donnell goes to bed, as he said, 44 o'clock every night, and I walked into his kitchen, and Joe's white. I said, "What's the matter?" He goes, "I just got off the phone. Willie died." You got to be shitting me. Yeah. And the two of us sat down on stools in his kitchen, and we didn't say a word to each other for like a half an hour. Yeah. So this can't be happening.
Well, I remember so many things. Again, someday I'm going to write a book, and I'll try to make brief because there's a lot of tentacles to it. But I was speaking at the Touchdown Club Arlington that night. It was January 9th, 2003. The late, great Dr. Mike Foley had asked me to come up.
Right. Yep.
Tommy Usyk, I'm sure you've spoken to that group, the pasta. Yep. So my dad, about a month before, and this was the first thing I thought of, Lynchy, when you were talking about Joe O'Donnell, my dad had been hospitalized a month or so before, and he was in Mass General. They were trying to figure out what was wrong because he knew there was something wrong. He had had a couple of spells, and but because he had this rare disease that they only found out about after he died, and the doctors begged us to do an autopsy because they basically told him he was fine by all the traditional examinations that you did back then, looking for blockages and that sort of thing. But I was doing my ill-fated radio show at the time, so on the way home every night I'd go to Mass General. And I'd sit in there with my dad till they made us leave. And Joe was there every night. And at the same time, it was such an emotional time for me. The New York Mets had offered me their TV job, and they were waiting for an answer.
Oh,
and
yeah. This was a legendary story here.
Yeah. The Red Sox ownership, new group, relatively new. This would have been December of 2002, because he died in January 2003. So I knew the new Red Sox ownership group really didn't want me. I was doing one game a week. I was Sergeant Friday on Channel 4, doing one game a week. And the Mets wanted me to do 80 games. It was way more money than I'd ever made in my life doing anything. And, my dad was always about right and wrong. So every night I come in there, did you tell the Mets you're coming yet? That they want you, and these guys don't care if you're here or not. But again, it goes back to Boston. I didn't grow up wanting to be the voice of the New York Mets. I grew up wanting to do Red Sox games. I love Boston. New York's fine. I enjoy my visits there. I don't want to live in New York. So, but I can't, my dad thinks I should go. I have to go. So about the fourth night, I'm in there, Joe's fourth night in a row. I've been holding off, and I've been telling the Mets, I'm going through a thing with my dad right now. It's a lot to think. Can I give you an answer in a couple of days? Sure. So I'm in there, and my dad says to me, you need to call the Mets and tell them you're not coming. And I was so relieved. I really went, really? Why? He said, because you don't want to go. Your heart's not in it. You want to be here. So Joe O'Donnell says, yeah. He used to call my dad Mr. Big, right? I've been Mr. Big for 4 days. Hey, it's easy for you to tell your kid, go live in New York. You never lived 10 miles away from here. If we do a circle around here, you spent your whole life here, But he doesn't, it's like, why are you telling Sean to go? He doesn't want to go. So I owe Joe a big one because, he finally was the one who convinced my dad to tell me. And I was so relieved because I just didn't want to go. It was a hard conversation to call the New York Mets and tell them I wasn't coming because the Wilpons and Dave Howard, who's the vice president of broadcasting, the people who ran MSG were so nice to me. And, but I didn't go, and I'm glad I didn't go. I mean, I wound up not doing the Red Sox games for a long time. But again, part of God's plan, I totally believe it, and I always have. I wound up doing things like the British Open and stuff that I never would have done had I stayed doing the Red Sox game. So anyway, another long story. But, the late, great Joe O'Donnell, when he died, I thought, hey, I'm glad they're together again in heaven, busting each other's humps because the conversations between those two were hysterical.
Almost on the same day. I can't remember. I want to say Joe was the 8th of January.
Oh, really?
Somewhere around then, but very, very close. Both of them were.
Well, they don't make them like that, right, anymore. I mean, it's just, they really don't. It's and it's sad. I think that their charm, part of their greatness, they would do anything for their family and friends. Yeah. They were as loyal and dedicated to the people they loved and cared about as anybody. Yeah.
How did your dad would always have his mock draft. I don't know how many teams in the NFL in those days when he did it, maybe 30. And so Will McMahon's mock draft. So everybody would get it, and everyone would do a mock draft. You pick up the Globe the next day, the first round of the National Football League, you compare it to Willie's, all check marks. He got 100% every one of those quizzes.
Back in the day, he was sort of one of the originators of that. And I was at our family's home in Hingham a couple of times during the draft when he literally got phone calls from friends of his in the league, Tom Coughlin being one of them when he was running Jacksonville. And it would be something along the lines of, are you sure that Minnesota's going to pick Bob Lobel in this spot because if they are, we want to get ahead of them because we want to pick. But if they're going to pick our guy, and my dad would say, well, yeah, I'm sure they are, unless they lied to me, which they wouldn't do, or at least some wouldn't. So, yeah, I mean, I remember when the Raiders made the big trade to get, was it Don Hasselbeck and Shelby Jordan?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to forget the particulars. I was a kid, but I remember my dad listening to my dad's end of a conversation with Al Davis, where when Al Davis hung up, he basically said, okay, that's good enough for me. I'm doing it, whammo. And so, it's, there were countless conversations like that, that he was a part of, the influence he had that people outside of our.
We'll talk about influence, and I don't want to keep you much longer. We're also running out of time, but I just want to, do you think as a broadcaster, how do I rephrase this? How much does ownership influence the hiring of broadcasters? In other words, let's say Robert Kraft was unhappy with Sean, or was unhappy with Will McDonough. Okay. You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Or Bob Lobel.
And I'm eternally grateful that we're out of time.
Maybe we better leave it like that.
That would be a tale for another book or another podcast.
So you think it's possible? These things happen all the time, I guess, right?
I've been asked many times. I mean, it's funny. I'm 62. I still get referred to as a Nepo baby who's, only on this game. I'm sure there are people watching the hockey game the other night thinking, oh, there's Will's kid. It's like, but yes, I mean, here's what I've said many times in articles and speeches. People would say, did your dad help you get started? Yeah, I mean,
it's just the other way around, Sean, is what I'm saying.
Tape at Nesson, right? When I started Nesson, they were in 3,000 homes. I mean, you could walk a mile wherever you live probably and walk by around 3,000 homes. So there weren't many people watching. So do I think he helped me get started at Nesson? Yes. When I started doing the Red Sox games when I was 25, Dan Berkery, who we all know very well, who I owe a great debt of gratitude for giving me that opportunity when I was 25, he waited about 2.5 months to hire me because he wasn't going to hire me because I was Will's kid. And he doesn't want to deal with you're just hiring him because he's Will's kid. He said, I barely know your dad. This is the most important thing on my station. It's the highest rated thing. Like my job depends on this. I don't care whose kid you are. I'm going to hire who I think is the best person. So I was grateful to Dan for that. So anyway, what I've said many times is my dad might have helped me a couple of times, but I'm pretty sure he got me fired at least once and probably twice.
Okay. You've answered my question as best as you could under the circumstances.
Hey, let me get one more spot in here. Hey, if
you're thinking about closer to the end, details to come.
Hey, if you're thinking about a new vehicle, go with Lobel and Lynch. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years, and I'm telling you, maybe we've been customers for decades, actually, because we know that, excuse me, George Gray will treat you right. They're family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, we call him, the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. He's a big fan of yours, Sean, a big fan of your dad's, and we're glad he's always been a lot since day one as one of our sponsors. But we could talk forever. Go ahead. What do you got, Sean?
Yeah, he's going to be a little ticked off that you guys didn't give him the RV treatment.
We got to come up with something for George because George is the greatest. But, since Lobel reads like 3 syllables for every 20 seconds, that's why it takes so long.
Listen to you. So what do you want to do, the Masters or hockey?
Oh, you know what? Again, I keep talking about gratitude because I really do feel like I'm enormously blessed. What I do right now, I love college football and I love hockey. I grew up, around the same time as you guys. Bobby Orr was the man when I was a kid, right? I was 8 in 1970 when he went flying. Everybody, kid on our block wanted to be Bobby Orr. People are naming their kids Robert, Gordon, or Jones, or whatever. I love my situation right now to have the chance to do one of the best college football playoff, games every week and do the playoff, have a chance to do major NHL games, do the Stanley Cup final. If I could just keep doing what I'm doing for the next years and then have things like we talked about drop in our laps. I would love to do the Masters. At ESPN, we carry the first 2 rounds, but we really use the CBS announcers. So the ESPN, where Scott Van Pelt is hosting, I'm doing the par 3, but we're really not actually on the telecast on the holes during the play. I had a chance to do that for 4 years when I was at CBS, and it was one of the great thrills of my life. So if that came back around again, great. If they want me to keep doing the par 3, that's great. It's just so fun to be there. But if I just keep doing, and I'm going to do some Red Sox radio this summer again, which I'm looking forward to. So if I just keep doing what I'm doing now and take that all the way till whenever the end is, I'll be continue to be a very happy and grateful guy.
Sean, I when you were talking about being in the booth with Ray downstairs and Scotch taping 27 pieces of information all around you, I meant to bring up a point, and I had a senior moment, but it's coming back to me now. One of the great compliments I've heard about you came from the late Jerry Remy. He said, of all the people I worked with in this business, nobody came more prepared night in, night out than Sean McDonough. He was the most prepared broadcaster I've ever seen in my life. And I thought that was something that was really something. I know it's something that makes you very proud.
Yeah, and I think Jerry might have mentioned that in his book that he wrote with Nick Cafardo. I was honored when he asked me to do the foreword. Again, you asked me about lessons from my dad. My dad worked hard at his job. These things just don't fall in your lap all the time. And, but you owe it to yourself, right? I mean, you can only be as good as you can be if you're prepared. And hopefully, like part of that hockey game the other night, some of what people remember is the little stories that require preparation. Anybody, and I know plenty of people in our business who do this, you can just tell when you watch. Anybody can sit there and say, 1st and 10, 2nd and 5. He's completed 7 of his last 8. That was a hell of a catch. It's, to me, you're cheating the audience more than anything else, because that's who, we're here to serve the viewer, number one. You're cheating the rest of the people on your production group, because if you're not at your best, the rest of the group can't be at its best. And you're cheating yourself, the opportunity to perform at the highest possible level. So the preparation part of it is really important. And if I get tired of doing that, like if I'm even tempted to say, what, I can just show up and wing this baseball game tonight, that's when I'm going to stop, because that's when it's time to go.
My sister said to me the other day, she was just talking like, Sean is so great, blah, 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 blah. The defenseman, number 74, Sullivan, was that his name?
Jacob Slavin.
Slavin, yeah. And so she says, and she knows hockey. She's been, her son, Tim, my nephew, went to Syracuse, played hockey there. And she said, I didn't know anything about him. And within 15 seconds, Sean gave me everything I needed to know about that guy. And I watched him the rest of the game, and he was a guy that could have been player of the game.
Right.
But Sean knew everything about him.
Well, thank your sister for me, because that is exactly the point, right? You turn on the game. I don't know a lot about, your sister knows more than a lot of people who are watching that game, but most people don't know who Jacob Slavin is. So make me take an interest in him, right? What you just said kind of touched my heart, because that's the whole point. Okay, I didn't know anything about Jacob Slavin. Now I'm actually interested in him, and so I use the word a lot, humanize the participants, make me take an interest in them as people. Why should I care about them when I'm watching this game? So thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly what we're trying to do.
That's why Sam Bennett and Bodie got into fights, because you were able to humanize them. You did a great job, Sean. And when we all meet back in Boston, from Arizona to Naples to wherever I am, let me look it up.
Well, you know what? Let's jump in that RV. We'll go around for a week and have a wonderful time.
All right, you did a great job, Sean. Thank you so much for helping us out.
Thank you, Sean. We're so appreciative, and congratulations, and we'll see you down the road.
Well,
the great Sean McDonough, everyone. Nobody like him.
Idols.
All right.
Guys.
Make sure you follow us on unanchoredboston.com.